Cannabis Lab, Cannabis Law, Accounting, and Business. Welcome to our first episode. We're joined here live by the founder of Cannabis Lab, Robert Friedman.
Hi, nice to be here.
You excited for this?
This is great, man. I appreciate you doing this.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. You've got a great group down here in Florida, so we're excited to get started. So just to set the stage for everybody, elevate your grind. This is going to be a podcast about the business side of cannabis. We're going to interview entrepreneurs, CEOs, advocates, fans of the industry. So why you should listen? You should listen because just like you, we want to be experts in this industry. We are all trying to find our way in this space. We're all trying to educate ourselves. Cannabis is a very complex industry, so join us while we sit with industry experts to help educate you on the business of cannabis and how to be successful in it. So our first podcast does feature Robert, and the reason being is, why should you join Cannabis Lab? What is Cannabis Lab? Who are these people, and why do they meet once a month, right? So, Robert, talk to us a little bit about Cannabis Lab.
Sure. I could tell you the long, evolved story of how we grew out of legal learning series and, we were doing continuing education for attorneys. But the truth of it, Cannabis Lab, for selfish reasons, exists for people like me and you. We saw the cannabis industry growing. We saw that there were opportunities. We knew we wanted to be a part of it, and there's some point where you're doing what you're doing in your life and you realize you want to be doing something else, and now you want to start taking logical next steps. And so to get involved in the cannabis industry, one of the important things is to start connecting with people in your community, finding out who's doing what, and seeing where you can fit in. And so out of some degree of necessity, I created Cannabis Lab so we can find each other, so the community can start connecting and people can start growing.
Well, very cool. So if it wasn't for Cannabis Lab, I probably still wouldn't be in the industry. It's been an amazing group. It's given me a ton of opportunities, including this one, to be in front of everybody here today. One of the things I'm always interested in when I talk to people who have started businesses is literally, how did you start? Because there are a ton of people out there, and they're amazing people, Tony Robbins, Gary Vee, that'll tell you, do the work, take the time, do the grind. And my biggest question to them all the time is, what is the work? That's what they say. They always say, do the work. What's the work? So you have nothing, and I know I don't want to say nothing because I know you had legal learning services, but one day there was no Cannabis Lab, and the next day there was Cannabis Lab.
Right.
And I'm sure you had to have a first meeting, and nobody knew what it was. So talk to us. How did you go from nothing to something?
Yeah, and doing the work is the work you create. And there's no shortage of that when you're passionate about what you're doing, when you really have a vision for it, where you know where you want it to go. The work never stops, unfortunately. And so it's a cautionary tale to be an entrepreneur. It's exciting to take something from nothing and make it into something. That is the act of creation. That is it's a big deal.
Okay.
And so with Cannabis Lab, we had a model in place. We had this company, Legal Learning Series, that still exists, where we were providing networking and education, and it's not a unique formula. It's nothing that hasn't existed as long as industry itself. People need associations for their industries. They need to network. They need to connect. But taking it from nothing to something, it starts with a core group of people who believe in what you're doing. It can't, as much as we're all entrepreneurs and small business owners, you do need to find people who believe in what you're doing, believe in your mission, and start connecting them.
Let's take a moment. Do you want to shout out those people who helped you get started?
It really, I could go on all day, but
if we leave anybody out, we promise we're not trying to offend you. We're just trying to figure.
No, and what's amazing is it is a nascent industry. We've only been around for 3 years, and so the people that started with us are, a lot of them, still with us now. Big firms like Greenspoon Martyr, within those firms, special people like Jerry Greenspoon, Michelle Martinez-Reyes, people that really had a vision for coming into cannabis early, especially in a state like Florida, which is behind the rest of the country. Law firms like Ackerman, and people specifically like John Robbins, who, again, I think jumped into the pool early, really got out in front of cannabis law, and very fortunate that they just happened to be around me in my space, supporting me from the legal learning series side and seeing what I'm up to. I can go on and on. David Kotler, another attorney here in South Florida, large companies like Thomson Reuters that really saw the future with cannabis law and started pointing me towards it. Companies that are here locally that people, again, as nascent as Florida is, huge companies that were already here. Green Road CBD, that BioTrack THC in the compliance space, all South Florida companies that were, quite frankly, killing it nationally in the cannabis space, even though Florida cannabis really isn't in full maturity yet.
And that's incredible, isn't it, right? You know, we have 14 operating cannabis companies, and when I say cannabis companies, that means complete seed to sale. These are the companies that you're buying marijuana from. There's 22 licenses, and listen, I don't know the state of that delta, if those people are going to operate or not, but it's amazing the amount of cannabis companies that are located here in Florida operating national, in a place where the local cannabis market doesn't really exist. And I think you've done a great job finding and recognizing those companies. You know, one of the things I love, so we just had an event Thursday night. We actually have an event tonight. If anybody is watching, it is a live event at Astor Lounge or Astor Rooftop in Wynwood. We are going to be introducing the Dade Leadership Board, so it's a great meeting because all of the leadership meetings, you get all the top people there, you have each leaders there. You got to remember a lot of these people are very busy, so they're going to go to a lot of the meetings, but they may not be at every one. The leadership meetings are amazing, so I highly recommend everybody coming out tonight, 6 to 9 p.m., meet the board, meet the other members. I know a lot of the Broward leadership, which I'm honored to be on, will be there, so come check us out. So we had an event on Thursday. It was my board, the Broward and Palm Beach board. I thought it was a great event. So when I show up to a Cannabis Lab event now, you know, there's 100, 150 people. There's a great panel. You know, we had stadium seating, and you look all the way up, and it's full. Take me back to some of those first events. What were those like? You know, your first, second, third event. You know, was it 3 people in the audience? Did you have 100 people? Was it a lot of people just trying to figure out, is cannabis something that I can pursue? What were those first events like? Because I met you in February, and I think by the time I met you, you really found your groove, and you guys just had the gas down, and you're trying to grow the group.
No, I mean, we've certainly done some shitty events. There's no question about that. But really, right from the gun, this thing was selling out. We were filling rooms. Literally from our first program. I think our first program had over 100 people. We had the CEO of a company called Jardin, which is in Vegas, and the CEO lived in Miami part-time, and one of our early sponsors is a success story. Actually ended up getting them as a client at that first event. But no, I mean, again, there was no secret, like, how do I get into cannabis moment. We were doing these continuing education programs for attorney. We stumbled upon cannabis law. We did a conference. We realized that this was interesting. You know, we hadn't done programs before where non-lawyers showed up. We hadn't done programming before where people were really excited to come and sit at a seminar. You know, we've done programs on insurance and tax, where I would say, man, if you put on an insurance and tax seminar, you know, no one's going to come. And you put cannabis in front of it, and we pack the house.
You know, the funny thing about that, and not to cut you off, I'll let you go back in a second, but a lot of what we talk about is insurance, tax, and everything else. Yeah. It just has a cannabis spin, and I think because of the regulation, it makes it a lot more entertaining, but, you know.
And so that I think was the light bulb moment of Cannabis Lab was, you know, all of this stuff in and of itself isn't that interesting, but because cannabis is so new and there are so many challenges, it's a roller coaster, it's constantly changing. The need to stay educated, the need to stay informed and up to date, it's critical. And so it wasn't how do we make a buck and fill a room and get people networking. It was this is important. People really didn't know what's going on. There are a lot of changes, and it's not an easy road. And so that was the birth of all of this.
And candidly, you know, and maybe I'm biased because I'm a member, but your events are very welcoming to somebody who's even just trying to test the waters of cannabis, right? There are a lot of conferences that come through Miami that, you know, and I don't want to say competition because it's not competition, but Benzenga comes through here. I'm sure ArcView comes through here at some point. There's a lot of groups that come through here. But for somebody who's looking to get started in the cannabis industry, that is a $500 and $800 investment, a full day of time, whereas you charge $50 for your events.
Right.
You know, $50 if you've never been here before. Once you remember, the meetings start costing a lot less than that. So was your idea really, you know, because the industry is the way that it is in Florida, was your idea to really just say, hey, if you're interested, come check it out and we're going to educate you? And then, you know, I know you do a conference at the end of the year. You know, was that the type of person that you were going after and not just the guys at the top? Were you trying to make it for everybody?
Yeah, no, I mean, this goes back to your first question. I think when I thought about Cannabis Lab as it was evolving, I thought about people like me and you and I, that want to be in the space. You know, how do we make that first step, second step, third step, where it's just finding out a little more, making some relationships, seeing what the jobs that are available, what are the opportunities. And so that's literally by design how we built this organization. I thought about it all the time where I was like, as a group, the way I visualize it is if I'm living in Miami, I'm living in Fort Lauderdale, and I wanted to get into cannabis, is there just this room we can walk on? Is there, is there a sign above the door that says cannabis industry? And I think that's what we were trying to do is how do we turn that sign on so people know what door they can walk through, they know what room they can come into, and they're going to find out more about this industry. So it really was maybe not meant for everybody. I wouldn't say it's the everyman finding out the industry, but for the business professional who really is already doing hard working in the industry, has already established themselves in their own practice. That's who we are keying in on. And
I'd like to elaborate on that because I think cannabis still gets a bad rap. I read an article today, is actually by the managing director of Entourage Effect, and I guess we're in the 100-year anniversary of the prohibition of alcohol, right? And here we are sitting here.
Roaring 20s.
Yeah, and we have members of NORML on the board. We have members of Regulate Florida, and we're all sitting here trying to
Cannabis News Florida.
Cannabis News Florida as well, and we're all sitting here and we're all advocating for the end of cannabis prohibition. But I think a lot of people on the outside, and it's very crazy to me, still have that stigma, still have that reefer madness stigma. And when you come to Cannabis Lab, you'll realize that this is a group of professionals. It is not just a group of stoners that are just sitting around, passing a joint, talking about marijuana, although those conversations do happen because we enjoy partaking in
Things
it.
happen.
But this is a group that speaks about taxes. It's a group that speaks about accounting, about legal issues, about regulation. Many of the members are upstanding members of society. They work in their chambers of commerce. They work in government. They are successful business people. I myself, I'm married. I have a 3-year-old daughter. I'm a business professional, and there are many other people in our group that are very similar. So talk to me. Was that always the case as you were doing this group? Was it always the professionals? I know there are groups like, there's no secret that MJ BizCon is the biggest event in our industry. That 10 years ago, it was a bunch of guys with long hair and sandals and cargo shorts coming together. And now this past year was 35,000 people, most of them wearing suits and everything else, right, convening to discuss the business of cannabis. Did you guys go through that same thing, or was it always business professionals from the get-go?
Yeah, we jumped right ahead. I've noticed the cannabis education or networking landscape, and there are advocacy groups. You mentioned NORML and Florida for Care and NCIA, and I look, it's all important, right? They're not competitors when a Benzinga comes to town or an MJ Biz. It's all important. The more we can learn and connect and build resources, that's how this industry is going to move forward. But yeah, right away, my thought was if cannabis is going to have a future, if this industry is going to move forward, we really should key in on the business segment. We really should key in on, to some extent what people are saying is the illness of the industry or a problem with the future is bringing in big corporations, is bringing in professionals who come from more of a suit and tie background, but it is the future of this industry moving forward is working closely with your tax guy, with your CPA, working closely with your attorney, good compliance, good corporate governance. So we all want this industry to move forward. We all want cannabis to be deregulated, or we want the end of prohibition. And so right from the beginning, our point of view was, let's just grow the business, right? Everything else will take care of itself.
And I couldn't agree more. I think we're all heading in the right direction. There are 33 states with cannabis legal in some way, shape, or form. If you want to learn more about Florida specifically, definitely come to our events. We talk a lot about Florida regulation. There's a lot of interest in breaking up vertical integration. As I stated earlier, there's 14 operating cannabis companies in the state of Florida. In our last event, I was in between the directors of compliance for 3 of them advocating for breaking them up. So, it's always an interesting event, especially, like I said, to go to an event and have 3 out of the 14, the directors of compliance, in the same room is incredible. So one of the things I want to talk about now, and this is more on you to kind of tell us some of the success stories from Cannabis Lab, right? So if we're going to take time out of our day and we want to learn about cannabis and we're going to come 3 hours a night to come to an event, obviously everybody wants to get something out of it. Right. Now, personally, I can talk about my success story. I happen to find myself into the cannabis industry. I left an organization and really wanted to stay in cannabis, and through Cannabis Lab, I was absolutely able to do so and somehow get even more ingrained in this industry. And you can see that as I'm sitting here next to you, interviewing you on our new podcast. Right. So, beyond that, I'm working with real cloud pros, taking my expertise in the IT world and applying it to the cannabis space. I know you've helped some companies find funding. I know you've helped other people get some really great jobs through your group. And talk to us, if you can, I don't want to get into anyone's too personal story, about some of the success stories through Cannabis Lab.
You're right. I don't actually want to call anyone out by name without their consent or tell any specific stories. But back to your point about Cannabis Lab being for market entrance, actually Cannabis Lab is for 3 people. And the benefits, I think, are very specific to the 3 groups. And so the first is market entrance, like you and I. How do I find out more? How do I connect? How do I find jobs? I think it's very obvious how we're helpful. You are meeting people from within the industry. You can look on LinkedIn for jobs. You can go to Indeed.com, but you and I both know it's who you know. It's the connections you make. As sophisticated and as digitized as the world has become, that need to connect on a one-to-one level. So the success stories of finding jobs, as you know, really are endless. And so for market entrants or people looking to transition, that's the first segment of who Cannabis Lab is for. The second is people that are already in the industry. And as you know, this is an incredibly volatile industry. A lot of our members do work for MMTCs or plant-touching companies, and they aren't doing so hot. Not all of them. This is going to be, as you know, in a different conversation, a very tough year in cannabis. Jobs come and go. One of the values of an organization like us is job security. Like you said, there were 3 compliance officers from 3 different MMTCs at the last meeting. It's good that they connect. It's good that they know each other. It shouldn't be so competitive as that's my enemy. The end of the day, you may not be at one company that you thought you were at the day before. And so to stay connected, to stay in the industry is the number 2 group that we focus on. And then the third group is, you're just figuring it out. So we don't need you to be fully entrenched. We don't need you to be, I'm 100% into the cannabis industry, but you are taking it seriously from an investment point of view. From a job point of view, you're graded already at what you do, and you just want to add cannabis as a vertical. We are a great group for you to just kind of figure that piece out. And so from those 3 perspectives, there are actually several stories that we're proud of how we've benefited those segments, but it is by design. I mean, all we want is members and sponsors. That's how we grow and make money, but how we really know that the formula works, that the system works, is by people getting jobs, by people investing and growing, by commerce happening. And so those success stories mean everything to us.
And don't worry, folks, you'll definitely hear those success stories. Right. That's half the reason that we have this podcast, is to bring on those people who have seen success through Cannabis Lab. Robert, I really do think that you've built the best cannabis networking group in Florida. I worked for a different company before that. I told you that before I was involved with you. I truly believe that, and I congratulate you on that. But you're only as good as what you do tomorrow, right?
That's right.
You've been pretty successful up to this point. The group has grown. We did a great event starting out 2020. We've got an awesome event coming up with a personal hero of mine, Ricky Williams, that we're going to be seeing for the Super Bowl. For those of you who don't know, which is all of you because nobody knows who I am, I actually got to meet Ricky Williams when I was 15 years old at a football camp. I was an offensive lineman and a linebacker, and they let us big boys pick a position to play. So I got to play running back, and I got to train with Ricky Williams. I never imagined, 17 years later, that I'd be sitting in an event with you watching the Super Bowl with Ricky Williams. So I have to thank you for that. But everybody should come check that out. That is, tell us a little bit more about the Super Bowl party, if you don't mind, Robert.
Sure. We do a lot of educational events, like you mentioned, very high-level networking. I say it all the time, we're the group for nerds, but every once in a while, we do something fun, and this is one of them. So we do have a good relationship with Ricky Williams. He obviously is a name you know in the cannabis space. He's a name you know as a Miami Dolphin, former Heisman Trophy winner. He has a brand here on the table, Real Wellness, that we have a great relationship with. It is a great product, and we're happy to be working with them. So through a lot of good things working together, he's going to come and watch the Super Bowl with us here in Fort Lauderdale at Stash. For members, it's free, so that is a big incentive to join. For non-members, it's a lot more expensive. You can find out more about it online. I didn't want to make this a pitch, but certainly check us out at joinclab.com or Instagram at the Cannabis Lab.
Oh, it's not a pitch because I think what you're doing here, there's a lot of friends that I have that will actually reach out to me because they see that I'm in cannabis and they ask me, how do I get involved? And again, before I got involved with the organization, mine was reach out to Robert Friedman at Cannabis Lab because he's going to help you get involved, or at least his group is, right? So I don't think that we're really pitching it here. I think as long as we get the word out, come join. You guys, if you really want to get interested in cannabis, you're going to be very interested in it. So the reason I bring up the next event is, we're in January. We're at the start of 2020. I know you do an annual conference every year. What do you expect? What are you planning for this year, for Cannabis Lab, and how do you see it progressing and growing? What's the future of Cannabis Lab?
It's interesting you say that because that's all I ever think about. And here we are broadcasting live to the world. And for me, as much as I want the world to know about Cannabis Lab, it really is about putting the right people in a room. And so by design, by you and I saying who do we need to have, who do we need to find, even when it comes to our conference, it isn't always about selling a ticket and trying to get someone to come into the room. For us is if we could fill that conference with the 500 most important people in cannabis that we all think are really moving the needle forward, very tip of the spear people, that's really the future of Cannabis Lab is really connecting the best and brightest and making sure that we're all sharing thoughts and ideas. I know you have other guests you want to get to this morning.
Yep.
But yeah, that really is the goal. We want everyone to know about Cannabis Lab. That is important for us, but what's really important is that we're getting the right people together to move this industry forward.
Awesome. Well, I am very excited for this year's conference. The 2019 conference was incredible, and I said 2019, I just chewed up that word. The 2019 conference was incredible. You had some amazing guests. You had Rohan Marley, you had Ricky Williams, we had Brady Cobb there, we had Jared Mirsky, David Tran,
Kim Rivers.
Kim Rivers was there. Tons and tons of high-level cannabis executives. You had some of the biggest funds in the industry there. You had Phyto Partners, you had Entourage Effect. A lot of the major MMTCs were there in One Plant and True Leaf and all the others.
Right.
It was an amazing conference, and I can only imagine that 2020 is going to be better. So, unfortunately, I'm going to have to kick you out soon because we've got another guest.
I get it.
But are there any parting words that you'd like to leave us with?
No, I think what you're doing is great. I think this is important. We've talked about this obviously before we started, that elevate your grind is meaningful in the meaning we impart to it. And I think what is important about what you're doing is everyone has a story. We've talked about this. 5-6 years ago, almost everyone in our group had nothing to do with cannabis. And so that journey, that transition, it's a lot about what C-Lab is about. I think it's a lot about what you're doing is about. And so I appreciate you taking the time to explore with everyone, and I wish you all the best of luck.
Awesome. Well, I'm happy to do so. So we're going to bring in Charles Felix of Cannabis News Florida. While we're switching out here, I'm going to take the liberty to do some shameless plugs and thank some of the people that helped make this happen. First is going to be Charles Felix with Cannabis News Florida. He was kind enough to show up today, help us set up all this equipment, really coach us up on how to do this, and we can't thank him enough. So please check out Facebook, check out Cannabis News Florida, check out Charles. He does some great interviews, and I hope that one day my interviews and my shows will be as good as his. I'd like to plug Real Wellness by Ricky Williams. Real Wellness is a sponsor of our upcoming Super Bowl party. They've got some great herbal supplements. It is not just CBD, folks. This is a 6-in-1 tonic. It has turmeric in it. It has cinnamon. It has CBD in it. This is the best multivitamin that you can take every morning. I've used a lot of CBD, folks, and this is definitely my favorite. Obviously, I'm biased, but definitely check it out. And then we have our maintenance and repair salve. Maintenance and repair salves is great for aches, pain, sore, inflammation. Again, this is a 10-in-1, a lot of herbs. Go to realwellnessherbal.com. Go buy it for yourself. Try it out. Promise you won't be disappointed. And then check out our Serenity Tonic coming out at the end of the month. I'd like to plug my company, Real Cloud Pros. Real Cloud Pros, we are IT specialists for the cannabis industry, focusing on cloud, data management, privacy and security, and compliance. And also like to thank Cannabis Lab. Without Cannabis Lab, we would not be sitting here. Check it out at joinclab.com. And then finally, our beautiful venue where we're going to be hosting this show, for lack of a better term, for the immediate future, the Hub Spark. The Hub Spark is one of the coolest co-working places in Florida. HubSpot, to me, it's a place, if you're a creative, there's no better place to come. Come check it out, check out their coffee. It turns into a little bit of a happy hour in the afternoon. They've got conference rooms, everything you need to get your job done right here at the HubSpot. Check out their happy hours, check out their events. But thehubspark.com, and the Hub FTL on Instagram. Check those out, and thank you for letting them host us. I guess at this point we'll bring our next guest, Charles. Charles, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you. Appreciate being here. It's a little different being on the other side of the microphone, but it's interesting. This is sounds like it's a great venue for Cannabis Lab, and getting to know a little bit more about the industry is what it's all about. Education is the primary aspect of the cannabis industry today.
Awesome. Well, Charles, I really appreciate you doing everything that you've done to help us get started today. Robert and I would not have been able to do this without you, and I'm afraid that I won't be able to do it without you going forward, but we'll figure that out. I think it's amazing what you've done with Cannabis News Florida. I was just on the panel with you at the Broward event on Thursday, and I think you're very educated on a side of the cannabis industry that, to me, doesn't get as much attention as it should, which is the medical side of the business.
Absolutely,
right?
Correct. That is correct.
Cannabis, listen, we all enjoy smoking cannabis. We all enjoy consuming it. There's some of us that use it to watch funny movies or to hang out with our friends, and they use it as a replacement for alcohol. But there is a lot more to this plant than just using it to smoke and quote-unquote get stoned. Charles, where do you see, and I know you and I didn't really do a pre-interview or anything else, where do you see the medical side of cannabis going? Do you think it's heading in the right direction? Do you think it's being stunted because of the stigma on cannabis? Let's talk about the medical side.
The medical side there, it's interesting when you look at the medical industry in South Florida, somewhat throughout the entire country, you find a lot of people in favor of it as a medicine for certain situations. But the problem you have is the federal laws, and the hospitals can't touch it, so it causes a problem. More and more doctors may not want to become a referring cannabis doc, but are actually taking their patients and referring them to cannabis docs. And they're seeing them more from the CBD side, which you don't need a recommendation for, a prescription for, to the medical cannabis side, which you do. One of the interesting facts that I've come across for healthcare, and it's important to be able to spread this out to the healthcare industry, is if everyone knows the Mayo Clinic. Everyone knows the Mayo Clinic,
Yep.
right? I mean, the Mayo Clinic is, if not the number one or two, if you're taking a look at the Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic, the 1 and 2 of healthcare throughout the United States, maybe throughout the world. Interesting enough, the Mayo Clinic has 3 locations, and this is on their website. This is not like an underground newspaper. It's on their website. That in Arizona, they have places in Arizona, Jacksonville, and their main campus is in Rochester, Minnesota. If you look at their website, or look at my website, look at Cannabis News Florida, you will see that in their main campus in Rochester, Minnesota, that they allow patients that are on a regimen, that have a medical card in Minnesota, and also have a legal bought their product legally, can actually use it in their outpatient or the hospital. But they will not in the state of Florida or Arizona. So what does that tell us from a healthcare perspective? It's moving forward. And because when I look at this industry, healthcare is the driving force. Until you go into a recreational state, which we're not for maybe another couple of years, healthcare is where it starts. And you have to convince the healthcare professionals out there that this is an alternative to what they've been using for a variety of different diagnoses.
So me personally, I think cannabis is going to be, I don't want to call it a wonder drug, but I really think it's going to really change the landscape of healthcare moving forward. I think there are a lot of people, especially in our state, that are self-medicating with it.
Correct.
And I think that does lead to a problem, because it's, where are they getting it from? Are they getting it from the MMTCs, or are they getting it on the black market? And then when you get it from the black market, even if you know the person you're getting it to and you know it from a long time, where are they getting it from? Then it goes back to what's on that plant, the pesticides and everything else. Do you think that the black market is what's hindering the healthcare market going forward, or do you believe that with the right people behind it, that we can really push medical cannabis in its best form, where we can start researching it, extracting the best parts, and maybe create pills or other forms that are not smoking a joint that will be more socially acceptable?
Well, I think part of it comes to the point in time you need to have physicians, professionals within this industry rely on a lot of evidence medicine. And unfortunately, we have not been able to do research in the United States. So a lot of physicians, a lot of people in the healthcare industry have a problem accepting research from other parts of the world. So until we really can do a lot more research within the United States, I think it becomes a problem. And the other issue is, I think it has to be, if you're going to call it a medicine, treat it like a medicine. And I think part of it is that we go a little bit off the medication part of it and more of the recreational part, even if it's even if it's medical. So I think part of it is convincing healthcare professionals, little by little, not for everything, but for a lot of different situations, this is a better medication. It may be getting people off of opioids. It's been proven all over the world, in different parts of this country. It's a great alternative to be able to get people off opioids.
I couldn't agree
it's
more
tough.
with that.
It's tough.
I couldn't agree more with that. So I got familiarized with the opioid crisis when I met my wife. She's actually an addiction counselor at a rehab center in Delray Beach. And you see a lot of people, so me as an ignorant person assumed when she got that job that everybody that was in there deserved to be in there and they abused drugs and everything else. And she really opened my eyes that there were a lot of people that had a surgery or just had a problem and they got addicted to opiates. I believe there are a lot of companies in this country, not this country, but I know in Canada, there are actually organizations that are working on medical cannabis programs to replace opiates, and I couldn't agree more with you. I think that really is the best way that this country can fight the opioid epidemic. Personally, I don't believe that it's going to turn everybody who's already an addict, but I think it's going to help prevent future crops of opiate addicts.
And again, it's proven when you talk to a lot of different people, and again, research. I mentioned time, research. We just don't have it here. So what we have to do as advocates of the industry is educate. And if it works for opioids, you got to get those stories out there. You got to get the people, and a lot of them opening up now. It's almost kind of like, well, I don't really want to open up that door and put my story out there. But you know what? It's nothing to be ashamed about. And the more people hear about that, the more positive it is. But I go back to this point of dealing with healthcare, which I have through the other part of my business, South Florida Hospital News. I've been doing this for 16 years. And I meet with a lot of people within the healthcare industry. Very few of them are total naysayers of this. Very, very few. But their hands are handcuffed. And that's a problem. You know, you should be able to, in a state, if a state, and again, states' rights, talk about states' rights. If it's legal in the state of Florida for medical use, the federal government should not stand in the way of the hospitals or outpatient surgery centers to be able to use cannabis. If you want to go in, that's the fight we need to be able to make.
I think that's great. And you know, one of the things that you had mentioned on there was getting the news out, right? And selfishly, I'm going to use this so we can shamelessly plug your business, is that's what you do. You know, right. You have Cannabis News Florida, and a lot of what you do is getting the news out there, getting the good news out there about the positive side of cannabis and not just the recreational side of it. It's actually, you and your son are very big on educating people on cannabis and the uses for it. So talk to us a little bit. You know, I'll give you the opportunity here. Let's talk about Cannabis News Florida, and then, you know, as you're talking about that, tell us what you see are some of the most popular topics in cannabis that are driving traffic to your site, or just that people want to read.
Well, let me tell you why Cannabis News Florida started. Okay. And the story behind it, which is I'll go into the short version. About 4 years ago, I attended the first cannabis event or medical marijuana event that was down here in South Florida. Okay. And I walked in. And it was interesting. The crowd was kind of a mixed crowd. You know, it was kind of a mixed crowd, didn't see that much. And to your point, listening to you earlier, from the tie-dye T-shirts and that, all of a sudden turned into suits the next year. And you're finding that it became a viable business. The problem being is that there wasn't a resource out there that was able to educate. Again, let's talk about the state of Florida. Not talking about nationally, state of Florida. Medical cannabis only. You got to have the healthcare industry behind you. I have the healthcare industry behind me for 16 years at the time. So I was able to get a message to them that really most others cannot. So little by little, over the last 4 years, I've been able to educate them with stories about businesses, stories about products, stories about research. We did a couple of times. We actually had an interview with some of the experts out of Israel. So part of it is educating the public in healthcare, whether it be doctors, nurses, executives, or techs, all those that influence patients, to be able to talk to them about the cannabis. And that's our goal. Our goal is not, we're not a consumer, per se, magazine or newspaper, similar to some others that are out there. We are truly, our goal is to get your message out to the healthcare professionals and physicians within the state of Florida. And we've been doing that like for 4 years. And I guess it was last year we were recognized as the 2019 Cannabis Publication of the Year.
That's incredible, and congratulations on that. And it's almost a family business, as and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the Cannabis News Florida was started with your son Andrew, and now he works for one plant going around the state educating people on the plant itself.
Right. He hasn't stopped. He started off in the education process, has continued in the education process. He probably has more miles on his car than anybody in the state. But he does a great job about it because he tells a personal story. And I won't go into that, but he tells a personal story about how how medical cannabis saved his life.
Don't get into it, because I'm going to want him on the podcast.
That's right. So, but the business is really it was a business that was actually, when I first put my first page in the newspaper years ago, the family looked at me like I was crazy and said, you're healthcare. What are you doing in the cannabis space? And I said, it's all related. I said, it's coming down. Then the law passed medical, and everyone thought I was a genius. So, but part of it is dealing with, my wife, we've been married now 48 years. She's my partner in the business. She's the editorial person within the business, and she does a great job. We both do a great job getting the news out. She probably... I'm the outside person, she's the inside person. It's almost after 48 years, and we haven't done this for 48 years, but the business together, we couldn't operate without each other. And it is a family business. We're not a big corporation, we're a family business, and the goal is education within the healthcare and cannabis industry. And in the state of Florida, they're married.
That's incredible, and that's amazing that you've been able to work with your wife that closely for so long. I'm sure it's been incredible. I'm sure
we've had one good year, I think so.
I'm sure if my wife worked with me for that long, I'm not sure if we'd still be together. Honey, I love you if you're watching this. So Charles, I really appreciate your time today. I think we're going to get towards the end here, but let's, so it's CannabisNewsFlorida.com.
Correct.
I don't know if you want to plug your Facebook Lives or your episodes or anything else that you have. Where can we find you?
We at CannabisNewsFlorida.com. You can find us on Facebook under Cannabis News Florida. And the key is we do, as Cannabis Lab is doing, we do interviews at different shows. We have a couple of shows coming up. You'll see it in February and March. You can check it on our website. If you'd like to see, we send out a weekly newsletter with updated information on a local and sometimes national basis of what's going on in cannabis. You can just email me. You can reach me at charles@CannabisNewsFlorida.com. That's how I live and breathe. And if you need any other information, like to get a copy of the newspaper, just give us a call.
Awesome. Well, Charles, I know that you're going to have to help me shut this down when we sign off, so I'm going to let you go while we plug our sponsors one more time, but really appreciate your time, and thanks for joining us.
Great. And it's the Cannabis News Studio.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that was the first episode of Elevate Your Grind, brought to you by the Cannabis Lab. We're going to plug our sponsors one more time. We are brought to you by the Cannabis Lab. Lab stands for Law, Accounting, and Business. It is the #1 cannabis networking group in South Florida. Check it out, www.joinclab.com. If you have some time tonight, we're going to be at Astra Rooftop in Wynwood from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. It's going to be a great event. Come check it out. If you're not doing anything for the Super Bowl, or if your plans are not that fun, come hang out with Ricky Williams. The Real Wellness team will be there. I'm sure we're going to have some great giveaways. It's going to be a good time. Hear from Ricky. Hopefully he'll join us for a live interview. So come check out the Super Bowl party. We are brought to you live from the Hub Spark, the #1 co-working spot in Fort Lauderdale. It is one of the coolest places ever. They've got giant bean bags, they've got couches, they've got desks for you to work at, they've got conference rooms. If you are a small business getting started, I would highly recommend checking this place out. Join them. You get coffee, you get a lot of great stuff. Come check it out at thehubspark.com and the Hub FTL on Instagram. We're brought to you by Real Cloud Pros. Check us out at realcloudpros.com. We are a IT provider for the cannabis space, specializing in data management, security, cloud computing. If you are a cannabis business getting started, if you need help maintaining compliance, or if you just want to see what the best technology is to scale your business, please check us out at realcloudpros.com. And then finally, we are brought to you by Real Wellness, one of the best herbal supplement companies that you can find. It's not just CBD. Ricky Williams, know him or not, after the NFL, the man spent a very long time educating himself on herbal medicine. He will soon to be a doctor of herbal medicine. This is not just a side project for him. This is his life. This is his passion. And if there was a Heisman Trophy for CBD, I'm sure it would be awarded to him. So thank you to our sponsors. Please check us out next week. We're going to keep doing these as long as you keep watching. And thank you, everybody.